Today on Mastering Military Life, Sean is a 13-year Air Force veteran after spending 4 years in the academy, so not 17 total for those of you counting, but only 13, and then has successfully transitioned out into an incredible life and business leader in real estate in the DC area. Sean's going to be sharing with us how he has mastered the art of transition, right? So this kind of loss that we go through in veteran life of purpose and finding a new normal and a new routine. And before we dive in, I want to take a moment and introduce my co-host for this episode, Mr. Pierre Cook, who is also known as Papa Piff. He is the CEO of PCS Pay It Forward and Pay It Forward Today. And Pierre, an Air Force veteran himself, is joining us for this conversation because we believe here at Pay It Forward that if I can live the story, I can be here for it. But, having a space to honor the conversation between these two gentlemen is important, and to recognize as a military spouse is just not something I've ever gone through. I've gone through a different on the military spouse side transition. So that's a different episode. So Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
So I'll start us off here and then I'm going to let Pierre take it from here. But Sean, can you kind of give us an idea of like what your service looked like? So 4 years in the academy and then 13 years in, where were you stationed, PCS's deployment, that type of thing?
Yes. So when you're about to graduate, right, you get the opportunity, as many people get, to fill out a dream sheet, right? So the Air Force says, "Hey, where would you like to go, Sean?" And I was born and raised in Oregon, always thought I would get back to the West Coast. And so my dream sheet looked like Washington, Joint Base, Lewis McChord, California, Traverse Air Force Base. There's nothing really that close to where grew up in Southern Oregon. But so I filled that out and I was like, great, we'll get to Oregon. And the Air Force sent me to San Antonio, Texas. Yes, of course. So first duty station was Lackland Air Force Base, the gateway to the Air Force where all enlisted basic training happens. I spent 4 years there. So I was a Air Force healthcare administrator. So pretty much everything that happens in a clinic or hospital that is not hands-on patient care, healthcare administrators take care of. I did that for 4 years and really enjoyed it. It actually grew to like Texas and San Antonio, and then got picked up for a master's program. Right? So I got a master's in healthcare and business administration through Baylor University. And that was 2 years. We moved then to the Florida Panhandle, so kind of even further away from where I thought I was going to be in Oregon or the West Coast, but had a great time out there. So I got married in San Antonio. I guess I should throw that part in. Got married, I guess I'd been in for 4 years at that point, or 3 years. Had our first kid in San Antonio and then moved up to Florida, had a second child there. We were in Florida at the Hurlburt Field, which is where Air Force Special Operations is headquartered, and a great place to be, really fun mission. We did that for 4 years and then got sent up to Florida. No, sorry. We were at the Florida Panhandle for 4 years. Then we got set up to Northern Virginia, the nation's capital, where I finished out my time. Kind of had an interesting departure from the Air Force because I was medically retired, which made my transition a whole other kind of stressful event that, was more tough to plan for than your typical exit from the military. But yeah, that's what my 13-year journey looked like.
So, I mean, medically retired is obviously different than maybe what you had in mind. Were you planning on trying to do the full 20?
Yep. Yeah, kind of from day one, I thought, hey, this is a good gig as long as it stays fun and it's, good opportunities, which those kept on happening. I thought I was going to get to 20.
So it is kind of a culture shock when all of a sudden you find yourself on the other side of it. Sean, for me, I did 8 years and I know it was difficult. Well, it wasn't difficult to leave. It was difficult because of the camaraderie you lose when you leave. And a lot of people don't understand. It's not the military you miss so much. And I say this all the time. You've all heard me say it. I didn't love the military, but I loved the men and women I served with and the things that we accomplished. And, when you separate, and for you being medically separated, that you may have got to keep your ID card and things. But for someone like me, I got out after 8 years. When I got out, no ID, couldn't gain access to base, to friends. It was a hard transition. So how did you find that going from one day you're an officer in the U.S. Air Force to the next day you're medical discharged and something you thought you'd had another, realistically, 15 years to do? How did you come to deal with that?
It was an adjustment for sure. So I guess fortunately maybe didn't always. My number one identity was not as an Air Force officer, which I'm grateful for. I loved being in the Air Force. I loved being in healthcare, but my identity was always more rooted in my family and my faith. So that helped. I'm not going to say it made it easy by any means, because you go from kind of having a plan and a path you're following to kind of feeling not special anymore, if that makes sense. Like you said, you lose your ID card. You can't, I can get access to base, but the building that I worked at in Falls Church, I can't go there anymore, right? All of my friends, all of the people that I hung out with that still work at that building, it's a secure facility. I can't just walk in there for lunch. And so it definitely is isolating. And, I chose a career path that as an entrepreneur, as a realtor, that can be very isolating as well, right? You're not going into an office, you're not meeting people all the time in terms of like coworkers and stuff. And so going back to like finding my identity in other stuff, I've always been, much more plugged in and found my identity in my family, right? I've got a wife, I have three amazing kids. I got more plugged into my neighborhood, like my non-military friends, which is weird because you don't have that shared background and everyone has these different paths. But at the same time, it kind of opened me up to appreciating like everybody's diverse paths that lead you to, this place you're at. So I'm grateful for where we did land in Northern Virginia, because one of the great things about being here is all of my military friends tend to circle through this area. So I've had my Air Force Academy roommate got stationed here. One of my best friends from the academy and also a healthcare administrator, he got stationed here. And so I've been able to keep those connections to people, but that's made it easier. I think it would have been a lot harder had we not settled down here in the DC area.
Sean, how long was it from you finding out you were going to be medically discharged to your last day in uniform?
It was kind of a long road. So I went through the med board process actually in Florida. I thought the med board. I was like, I had the plan. I'm going to stay in 20 years. I'm not going to get kicked out for medical stuff. And I think part of it was where we were at. We were in Florida. I didn't want to stay in the Panhandle. So we moved up here. I went through my annual review of the med board, because once you get med boarded, you're always like at risk. So you kind of know it could come. And when we got up here, my health really hadn't improved. I have like a heart condition that it's not going to kill me, but it just, the Air Force can't deploy you, right? And so you're looked at differently. And so they realized they couldn't deploy me. I kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, the health's really not getting better. And the stress of military life and moving and TDYs, deployments, all that stuff was not going to help. And so I didn't fight the med board when we got up here. And I think we were here for a year and a half. That was also COVID time. So everything was on different timelines, but it was probably about a year and a half, like offboarding process from like, hey, we have to go through the med board. You have to go through your VA rating and claims process, and then you're out.
And I think the other thing that people don't take into account like that, when you separate one way or the other, you leave early. It's so different from when you retire, is the kind of impact on your spouse. Because one of the things that helped me succeed was my wife saying to me, well, you're extremely talented, whether you're in a uniform or not. You chose not to be in it, so choose to do whatever you want to do and make a plan. But it was her support, because I got to be honest, I was not the most military minded person. I loved, like I said, the guys and things. I had some great jobs, but when I was away from it, like you, Sean, it wasn't my identity. So what I found really hard was when I got out, for about 3 months, I sat around not knowing what to do, because even though I was this rebellious person, I was used to knowing exactly what I was going to do every day. I was getting up at 4:45. I was checking in. I had to be in the queue. So when I got out, I sat around for about 3 months wondering what to do. And the funny thing, my first resume, I remember writing out of the military, was all my APRs and things. I had no clue on how to do it in the civilian world, because I went from college to the Air Force and I'd never had a job. So, my spouse took on a lot of pressures and helped me. So that's an important thing that people need to really, when you're in the military, guys and young ladies, you rely on your spouse because you're gone. So when you come back and you're not in the military anymore, you need to rely on that same resource you did while you were gone. So I'm sure your wife probably was a great benefit to you. So it's to all spouses. How did she find all of a sudden she wasn't a military, spouse?
He is a rock star, Pierre. So I always say, choosing to follow Jesus was like my number one life decision. Choosing to marry Sarah was my number two life decision because yeah, she balanced the transition and the support. Like you said, that support. She's always been somehow a cheerleader for me. All of my ideas, what I want to do, where I want to go. She's like, yes, let's do it. And she's not the type that she's called me crazy or like shut stuff down. And so like going through that transition, she handled it very naturally. I think part of it for her, she grew up as an army brat. And so she had that lifestyle of I can adjust, I can adapt. She's the one that like within a month of us moving here or really any location, she had a friend group lined up. She was making friends with moms in the neighborhood at the pool. And so like as I was going out, she was kind of like you lose the connection to the people in uniform, but she stayed my battle buddy of we're going to make it through this. Like God will provide, you know, the path is different, but there's still going to be a path and we'll figure out our way through.
I love that battle buddy. I love that. I'm gonna keep that one.
It's a new
Yes.
definition of a battle buddy. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a spouse, watching Brad transition was one of the most difficult things we did, right? He went from being an officer in the Navy, he went the corporate route to being at the bottom of the rung, right? Being the guy being asked to empty the trash cans. And it was a really difficult transition on him. So I think, having something lined up where you feel like you're applying purpose can be really powerful. And you and I have talked about kind of the purpose that you get in helping other military families relocate. I mean, how did your transition into real estate help kind of build the bridge into civilian life?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to be in a career field where I was able to help people. Like that's what drew me to healthcare. And then I've always had this kind of background passion for real estate, whether it was, buying houses as we moved and PCSed around, trying to get into real estate investing. And so having the health stuff that I went through, I didn't really have a huge desire to get back into healthcare when I got out of the Air Force. And so I was like, all right, let's get after it. Let's pursue real estate. And what I've really loved about it is, yeah, it's kept me plugged into my community, to my friends, to what is going on for the men and women that are still out there wearing the uniform and supporting the country, which is tough. Like you still, you bear the burdens when the government's shut down and when there's deployments and all the things that those families are still going through. But like, yeah, it's been a huge blessing to like be able to do that and have that niche of like, this is who I can support. Because I like real estate's fun, buying and selling houses is fun, but like I think if I wasn't doing it with a group of people that I like really cared about, I think it would feel not very exciting. I don't think I would last in it, but having been able to do it with military families, supporting military families that are coming to the DC area, which is a beast. It's a high cost of living. It's a major metropolitan area. There's 1,000 options and you're going to get 1,000 different opinions. So being able to provide kind of that balance and that like guidance to families that are totally overwhelmed when they get orders here has been hugely rewarding.
And I've got to add, but Sean's been my kind of personal real estate agent because I've been looking for a house up in the DC area, and it's been Sean. I get a lot of information out of Sean, so I appreciate. I've seen his professional side from the other side as a client because I've been looking, and I'm the worst kind of real estate, client. I've been looking for like a year and a half. I found 1,000 houses and haven't bought one of them yet. But I promise I'm going to one day. It's going to come through your assumable list, Sean, and I'm going to grab it.
Whenever works. There's opportunity in the market right now. There's a lot of homes available.
So Sean, for me, tell me about, because it's interesting. When I got out, the only thing I knew is I wanted to be in sales because I never really had to do anything like that. So I had to start at the bottom of the rung, but I had no idea. I took a job for commission only starting out, and it sounds like you had your plan once you got to Virginia. And I'm curious, what was the first step you took when you decided on that plan when you were going into your real estate career? What was the first step you thought?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. What I do now was not originally the plan. So when I was going through the medical board process, I'd gotten into real estate investing on the commercial side. So apartments, mobile home parks, that sort of stuff, which I really was excited about, I was passionate about. And then I realized I got in business with the wrong people. So it was a huge lesson learned for me of just because the door opens doesn't necessarily mean it's God opening that door. And I thought at that time, because I was going through the med board process, I was trying to figure out what is truly next. That because that door opened at that time, that was the right thing. It turned out not to be the right thing. But I had simultaneously, I was working on the commercial side and then the residential side of things as well. And sorry, Pierre, I kind of blanked on what the question is. Like, how did I get down that path?
Yeah, what was that first step, and how did it,
Yeah, well, I mean, so what you realize, right, is you've got to do something to put bread on the table, which was really what it boiled down to. And so I knew I loved real estate, and so I was like, let's get my license. I'll figure out if I like it. I'll figure out if I can survive because it's, you hear the statistic every time you're looking at getting licensed or they're talking about new agents that like 80% of people don't last past the first year. And so I've never been someone that's been very good at believing in myself, but I, I've also been someone that has applied myself and been successful, right? And I don't want to say that to brag, but it's like if you believe in yourself and if you apply yourself, you can, beat the statistics. And so, yeah, I got after it. I got my license and I started, you know, not really sure where to go. I didn't look for a mentor. I didn't look for a team. I was just kind of figuring it out, and things kind of fell into place, right? The pay it forward door opened, which was an amazing opportunity. I was looking for those things to do to get connected to people, and didn't really, without a background in sales, I didn't know exactly what it looked like to go out and find clients or find people to support. And so pay it forward for me ended up being something that it was like you don't feel like a salesperson. You just feel like you're helping people, which was fantastic.
How long were you licensed before you became an ambassador?
I think about 6 months, maybe.
I
I
love
got
that.
licensed in January, and I think I stumbled upon the Facebook group, like Military Realtors or whatever the Facebook page, and it was like, hey, we've got some positions open, and I saw Joint Base Anacostia, and I was like, that's near me. I know there. I go get I used to go, to the doctor on JBAD. So yeah, I was like, let's check this out.
Sean, if someone is transitioning right now, right, they know their last day in uniform is coming, and they're maybe struggling with the idea of not knowing what to do the next day, were there, podcasts or kind of media or resources that you use to help kind of ease in that transition?
No, to like, I don't think so. No, I mean, the military says they prepare you. The military puts you through. It's called TAPS class, the transition assistance. That didn't really help.
Tell me about TAPS. What can someone expect to learn in TAPS?
Oh, can I be bluntly honest?
If you're not,
absolutely,
there's no
please.
point of having this podcast.
I have no idea. It was a virtual class, right? I don't know if they still do it virtual or it's mandatory in person, but it was a virtual class. I think it was further away from when I was actually going to be getting out. And so I multitasked. I didn't pay as good of attention. It wasn't super useful. It wasn't, it was, don't add jargon to your resume, right? It was don't do yeah, it just wasn't like I don't know. I think the real answer is like you can go through a class like TAPS, but you ultimately like your success, whether you make that transition well, is going to be like just getting after it through hard work. So for me, like I chose one thing and I kind of like went towards it. I know other people that like they put out a bunch of fishing lines and shotgun their resume out to their network and apply for a bunch of jobs and they go that route. And so yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily media that I could recommend to consume. I think like the biggest point that I try and make to people now, or the biggest advice I can give is like don't feel like you're making a forever decision with that first job. That's honestly that's still a tough thing for me to to kind of live with is you are when you're in the military, you have that defined, like, here's how I can get to 20 years. You know, maybe what the next 1 to 3 jobs is going to be. When you get out, you can do anything, right? And so I kind of have that like shiny object syndrome where it's like, especially being in an area like DC, like, do I want to go work for Amazon or Google, or do I want to try and go work on Capitol Hill? Like, would that be fun? And so there are all these things that, you meet different people around here and they all have these jobs and you're like, that could be interesting. But also like, I'm at a point in my life where I've got to put food on the table. I've got 3 kids and we have activities and tennis lessons and all these things that it's like, okay, I'm going to stay focused. And my wife that is the one thing she has helped me do is stay focused. Keep doing it. You're successful at what you're doing. Like, keep it up.
Well, Lauren, there are a couple, I've mentored some of my friends as they leave the military, and some of the, and a couple of things resources that I've found that are useful. A couple books, like one is it's Success After Service, and it really talks you through the steps. And you should really start it like once you decide to get out, your TAP starts about 6 months before. If you decide to go, you should start looking at like Success After Service. The other one I found really, really good was recommended to a guy from me, and it was called Changing Your Stripes, leveraging your military mission to your civilian, aspirations. So it talks about, and I talk about it all the time. The one thing I learned in the military was the discipline to stick at something and to come up with a plan. And that's what this book talks about. Changing your stripes. It's like anyone who's ever heard me talk about things is like the same things that helped me thrive in the military are what made me successful in my civilian life. The planning, the never giving up, and not having an option. Losing was not an option. Because, I was in missiles, so there was no such thing as a half bad job. You had to do 100% or not at all. So it's leveraging those attitudes. And honestly, it has helped me so much. And you know me well, both of you. I still rely on it. I got out of the military in 1991, and I'm still living those life lessons and using those to succeed. That's the one thing. That's where the changing your stripes is one of the things. And when I talk about building your roadmap to success, it starts then. But Sean, the other thing you said there as well is, guys, your first job out of the military doesn't have to be your life. You have the choice, so I find it very, very interesting. A lot of people go into a career field, they stay there. You know what? No one's making you. But again, that's part of the military thing where you're in there, you stay with it. You're loyal to your position.
And you're asked to sign the contract,
Yep.
right? And so this is the one of the biggest changes is that not only is this not a forever thing for you, it may not be a forever thing for them, right? You're not guaranteed 4 years. You may make it 6 months and then you're no longer a good fit for the position. And so being able to have direction where you're making the best decisions for you and your family. But I agree, it is much easier to find a job when you have a job. So, doing what you have to do to put food on the table while also then continuing to explore what you want to do and what brings you purpose that is also going to put food on the table, I think is a adult experience. And as someone who's never served, there's many times where I'm still wondering what I want to do when I grow up. So, but it's just important that, the only way to work your way through the process is through the process. And you won't be stuck because you're not signing a 4 or 6 year contract. So knowing that you can pivot when it's time to pivot, I think hopefully gives people more comfort.
And that really is the mindset that people lose. When you're in the military, you have no choice. And and like you said, Sean, it's the big shiny penny up. You have so much that you want to do, right? And you just have to decide on the first step. But it is, in the military, hurry up and wait and get there. And
So Sean, you went from being in the military and having your everyday life, right, kind of dictated to you, regiment, routine, right, and then being a small business owner where no one's telling you what to do other than your wife, who sounds fabulous. But how did you create your own routine for success as a business owner after leaving?
I mean, I think kind of like Pierre was just saying, you don't stray too far from what has worked. I still like to be very regimented and, I have my lists and I block out my time. And so, really, keep on doing what works. One of the things that I do think that is a little bit tougher in civilian life, and I'm not sure if it's just being out of uniform or it's being in the entrepreneurial realm. But like in the military, I don't feel like I failed a lot, or I didn't have the opportunity to fail. And then as an entrepreneur, like you are constantly doing things that don't work because you're trying to find what does. And so there, you have your kind of tried and true methods of what works for you, but you also find a lot of stuff that doesn't work. And so one of the things I've been grateful for is, just being surrounded by other entrepreneurs and other leaders is like you learn from them, people that are more seasoned that have been through it, and you realize like, okay, like they're telling me that they failed a lot and they're running a multi-million dollar business or team or whatever. Like, okay, I was like, I can get through this because they've clearly gotten through it and succeeded.
That's an absolutely perfect analogy because, how do you know you're winning if you've never lost?
Yeah. It doesn't make it easy. Like
No.
I still like I've got the perfectionist. I want everything to work and it pisses me off when it doesn't. But I'm trying to like change that mindset of when something doesn't go right, like it's still going to get me down, but just don't let it get me down for any longer than it needs to, because that's delaying me from what the next action I need to take to try and figure out what does work.
I think somebody I know has one of the greatest sayings. She says it a lot. You know, imperfect action is better than inaction, and that's exactly
Yes.
it's nail on the head.
Yes. Yeah. And I've like, I say reformed perfectionist because I never used to be able to get something out there unless I, had really, really thought about it. And now it's like getting to that 85% solution and just being like, all right, let's press, let's move out. And so, yeah, that I've heard wise people say that a number of times.
They sound fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sean,
Absolutely
you just brought something up powerful, was surrounding yourself with people going through the same phase, or people who are at where you're trying to be good at and grow, and then a sense of community around that. Do you think that being in a community, whether it's something like Pay It Forward or a veterans association, is helpful for people who are transitioning out?
Oh, 100%. Like, because if you don't surround yourself with good people, or if you don't surround yourself with kind of who you want to become, you will end up lost and floundering. And so I look forward to those opportunities, like with the Pay It Forward group, to like get on training and see all these people, and then getting to see each other once a year at retreat. I love feeling connected to that group. And so there was the time before I was an ambassador, and it was very lonely, right? You don't, you have your friends, you have your people you see, but just naturally I'm not a super outgoing like person. And so even like the people in my neighborhood, mostly non-military, like I see people, but you don't connect with them because you don't have that background or that kind of shared experiences that you can fall back to. And so yeah, getting connected, whether it's Pay It Forward was great for me. There's so many other ways to get connected, whether it's through church groups or whether it's through the local other veterans associations, networks of whatever your job is. There's ways to get connected, and it's so critical if you want to flourish, right? You're gonna flounder in isolation.
It's great. No, I think it's again one of the sayings. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a crowd.
Yes, sir.
So no, I think it's watching you grow. I didn't realize it was 6 months when we had our first conversation, Sean. And you've become a rock star. You've grown incredibly, and you're well respected within the pet forward community and any community. I should think you well, but it's been absolutely a pleasure watching you grow and seeing you flourish, and more importantly, the service you're still giving to the men and women in the military, to your community. So thank you.
Hey, I'm here to help. Thank you, guys.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your story. We hope that this inspires many veterans who are in the path of transition, and any spouses who are about to go through it, to listen to this episode and to tap into resources. Maybe not reliant on TAPS as much as you would think, but stay plugged in with your community, right? Keep open lines of communication to make sure that we're giving our veterans the support that we need as we transition. So, Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.